All right, welcome to TIL Talks with Chris White, where we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies, both with patients and caregivers, along with industry leaders. Let's get going. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. What's up? What's up? We are rolling. We are back. Another episode of TIL Talks with my guest, Dr. John Powderly with Carolina Bio-Oncology Institute and Biocytics. We are picking up from where we left off on our last episode, going into some slides, some of the history on immunotherapy, vitiligo, see some visuals, give some perspective. I want to pass it over to you.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Chris. I think we've got some good feedback from the last talk. We've already had patients and some family members view the vitiligo, and they laughed about all the animal models and your story. And so if that gets some attention, hopefully these slides will get some attention about how we have translated some of that vitiligo research from the early days and the mouse work into applied cell therapy research that we're doing as we grow our own internal model of cell therapy. I hope so that your audience learns a little bit about how immune cells work, how we grow them, so that it'll inspire them to seek out clinical trials for immune cell therapy, which is a booming subdiscipline, subsector now of biotech, is the cell therapy.
Inquire and Ash, he's interested in clinical trials, solid tumor cancer, cancer start, where the resources. Here's a great place to begin. Make sure you enter all your info regarding tumor type, location. Are they currently recruiting, not recruiting, those kind of things. I center the clinicaltrials.gov. I'll start here and then work your way down. They'll have information on there, and it's always good to call to find out if it's up to date or not. But basically was just really interested in clinical trials and cell therapies.
Yeah, that's good. The last I did a search on the number of cancer drugs in development. For cancer drugs, there's about 5,000 cancer drugs in development. So that's going all the way preclinical into phase 1, 2, 3 trials. But when you look at the cell therapies, there are now 2,000 cell therapies in development. So the pipeline for cell therapies is also massive. So clinical trials will have most of those, and definitely once they're in phase 1 by law, they have to have it on a clinical trial posted on clinicaltrials.gov. The last time we were with your audience, we were talking about that the PD-1 drugs had been, on the front page of Science and Nature, and then they won the Nobel Prize, and those are the 2 Nobel Prizes. And then I think the very last slide was we actually talked about how wonderful, how great are these new modern immunotherapy checkpoint drugs. And the checkpoint drugs are definitely the most promising advancement in modern immunotherapy by far, period. Wonderful. Like, we are now making solid dents, at least 20 plus tumor types. And there's now about 200 checkpoint drugs in the pipeline just for PD-1. So a massive pipeline. This is some of the old data that's been extrapolated from the early melanoma trials looking at PD-1 and CTLA-4 checkpoints. And now if you give them in combination, the response rates are a little bit higher. But the point I'm making with this slide is, yes, checkpoint drugs are wonderful, and they are modern immunotherapy, and they're on most NFL Super Bowl commercials. They are definitely here to stay. But the problem with the checkpoint drugs, and this is kind of back to basics, is that those drugs, they release the brakes. We talked about that during the last video calls. They release the brakes of the patient's own immune system. But the reality is those drugs don't directly kill the tumor, right? They rely on the patient's own immune system. So therefore, when there is resistance to the drugs, or the drugs wear off, or the patients don't mount any of a response in the beginning, there's just ignorance of the patient's immune system, we don't see patients benefit. And so here is a nice, called a survival curve, patients who are not progressing, who, showing what % of the patients respond. And even the best case scenario, 30, maybe 40% of patients respond for a while, for up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And we've seen patients even with durable responses now going out 10 plus years. We have some patients coming to our clinic still with 11, 12, 13. So their immune systems were working great, and everybody celebrated. But we want to understand, why don't the majority of the patients, why don't all those other, 60 to 70% of the patients, why don't they benefit? How can we fix that? How can we make it so everybody's immune system can be unleashed? So what are we doing in our small model here is we're trying to look at why those immune drugs, just the class of drugs, don't work. What is it about cancer patients' own immune cells that may or may not work? And then take what we're learning to bridge that gap so that the 60-70% of patients might be able to have a swing at the bat, get a chance to mount a really robust immune response.
Yeah, improve that efficacy.
But to do that, we really have to, we say, bridge the gap. We have to really focus on the immune system itself, which means we got to take control of the patient's immune system. We define that we got to take it out of their body. We have to do ex vivo, out of the body, remove the patient's immune system, grow it up, re-educate it, steer it the right way, give it gas pedals, maybe some release the brakes, and then give it back to the patient a week or two later. So that's the angle that we're working on. And so this slide just shows some of those reasons why just the checkpoint drugs alone might not work. And we'll walk through those just so your patient audience knows that. So we divide it up into two big categories. We say one is primary immune resistance, or the best way I can explain that is the patient's own immune system don't even know about the cancer. They just have never mounted even a little immune response. They're completely ignorant of that tumor. And it could be from a host of reasons, but the patient's immune system never recognized it as foreign, never had a chance to really figure out it was there. Maybe it's because the tumor's hiding, or the draining lymph nodes are not presenting it correctly to the host, or that the tumors are so smart, which is often the case, that they're secreting hormones, if you will, cytokines or hormones or chemokines to suppress the host immune system. And so in those cases, we say that's primary immune resistance. So if you have primary immune resistance, we tend to say that the tumor is cold. Cold tumor, immune system's not aware, host immune system is ignorant. And in those cases, the checkpoint drugs don't really work because there's nothing to be unleashed. The cancer never even started a smolder of an immune response. So that is a cold tumor. So one way to bridge that gap of a cold tumor where the immune system is ignorant is try to spark it up, right? Try to kind of light a little fire, get it. Sometimes a beam of radiation. You might give some drugs, might get it started. A little bit of inflammation will beget more inflammation. And then finally, the immune system might start to recognize it. So there are drugs just focused on turning cold immune systems hot, right? We also, one angle we have is just take the patient's own immune system, even if it's cold, and take the patient's tumor and just brute force, let it learn that tumor and kind of ignite a fire ex vivo so that there is inflammation and then now antigen presentation and an attack. So we call that the ex vivo lymph node. So that's one brute force way to educate and take control of the patient's immune system for primary immune resistance. Now, what more often happens with these class of checkpoint drugs is patients do benefit. Of those that do respond, it's some sort of benefit we see where the tumor slows down. It may get stable. It may stop growing. It may decelerate. It might even have a mixed response where some are shrinking, some tumors are growing, some are shrinking. Or it might be a very, very slow but long, durable response. Those patients, we say, the tumors are hot. The tumor had already started an immune response even before the checkpoint drugs. In those hot tumors or warm tumors, it's easier for the checkpoint drugs to work. But when they do work, it's not always durable. It tends to wear off over many, many months or years. We say a secondary relapse, whereas we say a secondary immune resistance. Reasons why that happens. It might be that the tumors get smart and they say, well, golly, if the host is attacking me and I'm a tumor, I'm just going to downregulate self. I'm just going to make myself disappear. Bingo. Tumors know how to do that. They know how to go so dormant and become, we say, mesenchymal or stemness, or they just turn themselves off to like a null phenotype, or they downregulate HLA, MHC molecules. And they can also become very stemness, which is like dormant. Like they just, when you become a stem cell, you get dormant. People might not know this, but embryos and stem cells, they don't really express much self. They're very dormant.
Essentially stealth mode.
Stealth mode, yeah, major stealth mode.
Very
as a
made,
way to do
yes.
secondary. And tumors learn that also when they get chemo, right? If they're proliferating fast and the chemo kills the fast proliferators, some tumor cells know how to just get dormant in a hypoxic, and they just know how to just kind of just become very, very stealth and don't even grow. So there are ways that the immune system might be able to recapture an immune response, even if there is that secondary immune resistance. And so there's tricks of the some of the cells that we're growing that may have that capability. So more on that later. But I just wanted to let people know there's really two reasons why the checkpoints might work. There's primary immune resistance, cold tumor, and then the secondary immune resistance, which means that checkpoint drugs work in the beginning for a year or two. We celebrate, but then the cancers find a way to grow back. And it was a hot tumor that then kind of burns out. The tumor escapes the immune response. Yes.
So for a lot of the times when someone goes through a treatment and they're scanning clear and it appears that they're in remission, it's like it's not necessarily gone. It's just it's dormant. It's asleep. It's hiding. Like I said, like it's stealth. Doesn't mean that
You,
it's not around. It's just waiting to wake up, come back. Would that be
that can
kind of a
happen.
way to describe that, or?
Yeah, that can happen after chemo. Usually chemo doesn't make tumors disappear, but it may get down to a little scar. And then you can kind of still see it on a scan. It's like a pea or a marble, or it's very minimal residual disease. It's just a scar. But after chemo, tumors can hide dormant for a year or two, but ultimately they'll grow up after,
Okay.
unfortunately, after chemo.
Yeah.
With immunotherapy, we know they can go dormant also for a very long time, but the scar can disappear. The scar may go to complete disappear.
No sign.
And that's very favorable. Of course, that's very favorable. And usually the immune system has a durable memory. It can keep on working. But when it does get that dormant or that close to disappearing or having disappeared on a scan, it can still have a way that, yes, it can go dormant and then reemerge as a mutated version of itself and escape the host, a tumor escape, and relapse. And then in those cases, unfortunately, checkpoint blockade drugs don't work again the second time. We have to think with a different strategy in those cases.
It's like, yeah, it's built a
That's what we call,
resistance to it, right?
yeah.
Essentially,
So we
like,
call that tumor escape.
okay.
So in when it does relapse, there's tricks of how the tumors relapse. They come back again as not self. They downregulate their self. They may come back as literally a different type of tumor with more mesenchymal or stemness markers. Or they evade with other tricks, cytokines or hormones to really suppress the host immune response. So there's a lot of
Gotcha.
science. You could have a 10. This is part of some interesting reasons about the why. So cancers, you hear people saying, we like rare diseases, rare disease drugs. Everybody's cancer is individually a rare disease.
Exactly. It's got its own like code.
Every cancer is a unique mutation of a blueprint of the genome. And even within one person's cancer, the different metastases themselves may have their own clones of different mutations. And so when we look at immunotherapy, we have to think, wait, the immune system doesn't really kill a tumor because it's targeting a specific machinery inside the tumor cell. Instead, it's killing a tumor cell because of what the tumor cell expresses on its surface.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if you can imagine, so there's two camps of drug development and drugs. There are drugs that try to specifically target a mutation or a pathway in the tumor. And you hear those on advertise, those are in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Those are now common drugs targeting EGFR mutations, or two, for example,
Gotcha.
VEGF pathways, vascular endothelial growth. So there's dozens of those drugs, and every year there's like another dozen coming out. Great. Wonderful. They target a very specific genetic pathway. However, the tumor has so many other mutations, it also can mutate around that pathway and relapse, in my opinion, relapse quicker than immunotherapy can. But those drugs are good. They work best when tumors have fewer mutations. Okay. So on the left over there, I think I show on the left of this graph that some tumors with very few mutations, and this is a scale, the up-down scale, the y-axis is a scale of the number of mutations that different tumors have. And those tumors on the left tend to respond better to very specific drugs targeting inside the tumor cell that a very specific pathway. Or if one target on the surface and there's a CAR T, it'll target the surface, like for lymphoma or leukemia.
So it's got a starting point.
Yeah. And then you look at over at the far end of the right side of all those different types of cancers, the mutational burden, the number of mutations that those cancers have, like melanoma and lung cancer and bladder cancer, they are carcinogen driven. So therefore, there are lots and lots of mutations. The bad news is there's lots of mutations and those cancers are dangerous. The bad news is when there's lots of mutations, the targeted drugs that are very specific, the pills that target very specific, they don't tend to work as well because there's so many mutations that are causing the cancer to be much more unruly. But the good news on the right side is the more mutations you have, or the more mutations your tumor has, the easier it is for the host immune system to recognize it as foreign.
Yeah.
So that is why these checkpoint drugs were first developed and used in heavily mutated cancers that were from carcinogens like melanoma, lots of sunburn, lots of mutations. Smokers with lung cancer, lots of
yeah,
mutations.
that's what I was going
And
to
these
say.
checkpoint drugs worked great. So this is a huge amount of wonderful, just releasing the brakes, unleashing the immune system by releasing the brakes with checkpoints worked really, really good. So this is both the benefit of why immunotherapy works, but also it's a bit of a challenge because each patient's tumor is different. Within each tumor itself is different. So there's so much heterogeneity in each patient's tumor mutanome. We call it a mutanome, all the mutations as a mutanome. So this is a mutanome scale of the mutations, logarithmic scale within the axis at the bottom showing all the different tumor types. So if you were a heavy smoker and got lots of sunburn, you're going to be on the right side. You're going to be among those that benefit from it. If you were a young teenager that never did anything wrong and you got a rare Ewing sarcoma, it's one gene target, maybe, one proliferative mechanism. So you got to get that one targeted drug, or a leukemia lymphoma, which is usually one fewer mutations. So this just shows kind of why there's a camp of thought of drug development around targeting things inside the tumor with pills, basically small molecules or pathway targets, genomic targets, versus the immunotherapy, which is more of an onslaught of immune drugs targeting the surface of the cancer, including cells, which would recognize the surface of the cancer. The nice thing about immunotherapy, the immune system doesn't care what the mutation is, doesn't care what the machinery is, because the immune system can still kill it. However, for the immune system to work, there's got to be a lot of mutations, like a lot of carcinogen exposure. So we tell patients, hey, if you used to be a heavy smoker, then you get cancer. That's good for immunotherapy. But please, when you come for immunotherapy, don't keep smoking because that will destroy the immune system. But prior smoking is a sign that they're going to be heavily mutated and probably will benefit.
Okay.
So therefore, so if we are going to try to help develop cells, autologous cells for each patient, those cells have to be a little bit different, right, on what they're targeting. They have to also adapt over time. It can't be like a one-trick pony targeting one thing. It's got to be a polyclonal immune response against many targets on the tumor. And it's got to be able to adapt and iterate over time to keep remounting or maintaining an immune response for a long time so that the tumors don't escape. So that's a different way of thinking about not just like a drug therapy, not just like one cell therapy, but how do you get a platform where you're continuously innovating and iterating an adaptive cell therapy to chase the tumor and keep chasing it as much as that tumor tries to escape. So that's a different way of thinking about modern immunotherapy.
Gotcha. Okay.
So next slide. So this is how we're looking at doing this. And again, not promoting it, is educational so that you can learn about how we look at the immune response, which we think makes the logical sense for a natural native immune response.
Yes.
Which is don't just target one thing with one type of immune cell, but instead understand the many different dimensions of ways that cancers hide, like every trick they have, and then understand which immune cells know how to attack and get those tricks so the cancer can't hide. But that means you got to have a whole diverse military.
All the different branches.
Bingo. Yeah. So you can't be like, I'm just going to create one CAR T to target one thing for one dose even if you give it all the gas pedals you want. Instead, you got to think, how would the natural immune system respond? Kind of like in the pig. Remember we told you the pig and the horse
Exactly.
and how
Yeah.
they develop.
Yeah.
Which that is an entire orchestrated Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, SEALs, Delta Force, all
Everybody
coming
on
in.
deck.
Bingo. And that's a little more el natural, right? This is where it's a lot more complicated to do it this way, but it is the most natural way, which we think will be the most robust way. So it's the heavy lift of doing it and trying to learn the best way to grow these different cells. And even within each different cell type, there are sub fractions that are very focused on specific antigens, or just one antigen, but may have different corners of the antigen that the immune system is recognizing. So the way we're approaching this is, hey, wait a second. CAR Ts are fine, but we know that solid tumor immune system is way too diverse to be able to define or declare only one target for a CAR T. Instead, we're
This got
looking
to
at
have.
how can we get the best substrate of the best immune cells. Well, let's get it from the peripheral blood, either by whole blood, just a bag of blood, or leukapheresis, we get a really big bag of white cells, or the tumor itself, get the TIL, right? Like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you
Actually,
had. The TIL is
exactly.
polyclonal. It has memory. It might be a little exhausted and fatigued, and tumor may have mutated away a little bit, but it's
But
still
it's
the
still
rich.
there.
Bingo. So we're trying to look at each of those, or not trying, we are looking at each of those different substrates of immune cells from leukapheresis, whole blood phlebotomy, until comparing them, seeing which of the fractions, the different types of cells, how do they kill, what types of tumors do they kill better, how do some evade. So we have some rich, couple decades of trying to figure this out. And so I'm not going to walk through in too much detail, but just so like there are major types. We said the so-called exhausted cells that were reinvigorated, they're antigen experienced, they're knowledgeable of the tumor, but they just don't have the metabolic fitness to expand and keep fighting. So they need to be brought ex vivo. Then there are
Right.
those natural killer cells, and there's subfractions that's called memory natural killer cells, which
And case
kill
said,
different ways. And then there's gamma delta T cells. I mentioned to you those are in the swine and the horse, the pig.
yep.
They have rich gamma delta T cell populations, so we're looking at those. And then there's plain old TIL, like what you got. Those are very rich. There's only a few of them, but if you can get a surgical tumor in your hand, that's worth growing, right? Nobody's tumor should go in a petri, should go in paraffin.
No,
It
I
should,
mean
it should
it's
go into
literally
culture.
taking that tumor and extracting the exact cell that caused everything to mutate uncontrollably. And this conversation came up recently. What is cancer? Is the uncontrollable division of cells that don't die. And
Yes.
then that's where it all starts, and you backtrack from there. So if you can find out what part of that cell, divided and why, that's the whole deal with the TIL that.
Yeah. And if for those tumors that are cold, where the immune system hasn't quite ignited yet, and therefore they don't have the pre-existing memory, or NK cells haven't been aware of gamma delta. So in those cold tumors, if we know the tumor is, if we can get a hold of the tumor or the circulating tumor cells, we can literally force teach the immune cells how to recognize it as foreign. So that's kind of like pushing the pendulum so that you're literally igniting the immune response ex vivo to kind of get it jump started. So we're also working on that. So then the next, this is a big controversial question, and we love the biopharma industry. We do work with them. We really think that is the future of curing cancer is going to need everybody's help. But the problem is, if cell therapy is regulated like a drug product by the FDA, if big pharmaceutical companies look at it like a drug product, deliver it like a drug product, like as a one dose, one and done, drug product, and if it's reimbursed and then tracked like a drug product by the insurance companies, we're not going to get anywhere, because that is not a delivery system. That is not a platform. That is not a polyclonal, iterative, adaptive, robust onslaught of different immune fractions being orchestrated. Really, the question here is, should cell therapy really be a drug product paradigm, or should they be?
It's a process
Bingo.
necessarily. You can license the process, but since each individual batch, like you were saying, everybody's cancer cells, they're individualized. You can't, that's not like a mass
Yeah.
thing. Like it's
Yeah.
always going to be different. So
So the analogy is when parents were infertile and they were wanting to have a baby, they would go to in vitro fertilization specialists. And that was really physicians as a professional group learning how to do that down the hallway from their clinic. Insurance companies would deny it. It's very personalized. Obviously, mom and dad make an embryo. Insurance companies denied it. And it was basically would never become a drug. An embryo, would never become a drug, never. But yet that as a paradigm model, as a delivery, as a professional service, in vitro fertilization down the hallway for parents who demand it, that found a solution because the marketplace adapted to that delivery model. So demanding patients could be satisfied to do in vitro fertilization. They amongst their professional peers and professional societies, self-regulated that, and it was delivered as a professional service directly to the patient. So we're envisioning that autologous cell therapy should be the same way.
Exactly. There's a want and there's a need.
Should be the same way.
Yeah. So there's got to be a way to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how we kind of view it here. We've been carrying this flag high for 2 decades that the biopharma industry is wonderful and great, and they brought us so many promising drugs, and we were familiar with trials. But really, it is a drug product. It goes in the fridge or freezer. It's off the shelf, right? And it's designed for the masses. But when you think of cell therapy for that polyclonal, diverse, iterative approach, very personalized, autologous batch, single batch, that doesn't fit into the biopharma industry paradigm very well, which is why it's had a hard time sustaining fundraisers to do this in any kind of wide scale way.
The word you just said right there that comes up, it's for years. Scale.
It's very hard to scale autologous cell batching, very, very hard. And is it very difficult? No wonder it's like $1 million for a dose and all the treatment and delivery. So
you can't get it from anywhere else. It's your
at the
batch.
bottom. Yeah. So we envision that autologous cell therapy, really the future of regenerative medicine in general, should be FDA regulated. Check. It should be a process that you define with SOPs, with all the rigor of the FDA and quality and manufacturing.
Checks and balances.
To make a product, but the product is delivered as a professional service, where that's kind of where the difference is. And so that business model is still very much in its infancy, and we're trying to develop that, but that's where we see the market going. In other countries, they figured this out. They're already doing this type of model in other countries. But here in the US, this is what we're aiming towards.
We're a little bit behind.
Yeah, we're a little bit behind. And to my former slide about, would the FDA allow this? We as our little clinic model, and we submitted the Biocytics, what we call an interact meeting with the FDA. At least the good news is they gave us the permission to move to the next step towards a pre-IND. So at least from a regulatory oversight, we feel good that we have been de-risked so that the FDA at least understands what we're trying to do. It is possible. It's not against any FDA regulations. We just have to do all the same rigor of manufacturing at the point of care, right? In the trial. All has to be done, which that's a challenge, but if it can be done, we think it's reproducible. So that's sort of backs up on why we have 2 organizations. I think I mentioned this before. We're both a clinic, which is my day job, doing lots of research trials for many different sponsors. We've been about 180 phase 1 studies. That is all practice of medicine to do the trials with the drug industry, biopharma industry. And then on the right side, we're doing our own research lab for cell therapies, developing cells, autologous cell, iterative. And that's sort of where we envision the point of care manufacturing going, with both these companies orchestrated together. So really both companies were founded at the same time for the same reason, as a reflection of the same vision: deliver immune cells to patients. Phase 1 clinic, grow immune cells. We need biopharma checkpoints and drugs and agonists and sometimes a steering wheel. That all needs to be part of that solution. But the actual cell therapy part, we think, should be decentralized. And so why does that matter? So when we look at this you step back and look at this from like a business model, and I've presented these slides. None of this is anything proprietary.
Yeah.
So when we look at these, and I've presented this so many times, we ask, who is the customers? For in vitro fertilization, it's very clear. The customer is the parents. But if you're a stage 4 cancer patient and you demand immune cell therapy in a trial, who's the customer? What are the deliverables? It's very easy if it's a biopharma sponsor doing a trial and developing a drug, and that's easy. The company's paying for it. Technically, it's their drug. and insurance company's going to, pay for it, and that model works fine. But when we try to put this into a autologous cell therapy, a lot more challenging, because what the patient wants, what the cancer patient wants, is like the parent of the in vitro fertilization. They want the professional service. They want it in their region, in their community. They want the
Access.
access, right? They want it to be
100.
affordable, right? Like in vitro fertilization now, things like 30 to 40K. It's within range of discretionary funds for, middle class. Insurance companies might cover it, or they might subsidize it.
Part of the process.
Bingo. Patients want quality of life, and they want the chance of a cure. And there's a lot of data on that willingness to pay. What do they want? They want to know that they're not going to be only offered chemotherapy, which has no cure. They want to know that they're going to get access to many different phase 1 drugs in their community, and an opportunity for their immune cells to be grown and tried by many different ways, different fractions, maybe CAR T, maybe other fractions. So they want to feel empowered. Cancer patients want to feel empowered.
Exactly.
And they want continuity, which is they want to see their doctor or their nurses. They don't want to have to go 5 or 6 hours to get a cell therapy.
No.
May or may not get,
or even longer.
Yeah, or even longer in some
cases. You have to get on an airplane or even cross a continent. Like, I know people that reach out to me about that.
So what we're trying to do here is verticalize the delivery system. And so this slide says, if we're going to verticalize it, let's look at what the regulatory framework is. So over on the right, when we do our day-to-day trials for the many different biopharma sponsors, that's our day business, and big pipeline and wonderful trial sponsors, robust industry doing that. Those things are very, very clearly defined because it's a drug paradigm, right? It's the clinical is very plug and play. It's not making it sound easy, but it's very straightforward about what are the expectations of the different layers of the FDA requirements, and from a sponsor down to investigator, down to the CRO or CDMO or the lab assays. All those things are very defined. If we try to do that paradigm with the same regulatory structure, but for a personalized point of care professional service to deliver cells, we have to look at it like still satisfy the regulatory expectations, but also say who's paying for it.
Yeah. How does all that get covered?
How will it be? Because there's on the right side there, biopharma industry has investors and shareholders, and they know they're going to get a return on their investment, and all that's very calculated. That's a good sustainable business model for their investment. Over on the left, patient funded. Oh boy, who would invest in vitro fertilization? Because that's a professional service point of view. That's not like, unless a magic way you're going to scale that across the globe and build these facilities, but building facilities is kind of a heavy lift. That's not a good investment thesis for some investors. So we're trying to look at that model from, well, if it's a service and we do the service good and we can bring costs down and make it efficient, we think there will be demand for that. And if we can prove that our cells work on a future IND, and if patients demand it and it's affordable and the FDA agrees in a year or two, we think this will be hopefully ignite a point of care type of model to deliver immune cells where it is affordable. Insurance companies don't have to deny it because it'll be affordable to the patient, like IVF, right? So next is, so this is come a far way. This is what we like to say, our clinic and Biocitics delivery model at the point of care, where we have those different regulatory Venn diagrams. We have realized those, manifested them with people and SOPs. Then we got like about 600 SOPs by now, with the highly trained biomedical engineers up on the right, growing cells, using the devices, submitting the Interact FDA data. So eventually they can hopefully get it to the IND. On the lower right is the leukapheresis machine that we are accredited for that, and on FDA establishment as a blood bank, so that we can grow leukapheresis cells, collaborate and source those cells for other researchers. And that's our leukapheresis team. On the lower left is our clean room. We've got 5 clean rooms in different corridors, so we can grow cells in those clean rooms. Right now it's practice runs, and we're going through all the qualification and production steps to get that ready. The clean rooms are starting to get monitored for cleanliness. And so we're doing all of that for the next submission to the FDA. And in the upper left, that's our clinical research team that helps us manage the patient. So we feel if we can put all these pieces together, so it's a full stack, right? Like informatics, it's a full stack. So it's one clinical door, patients in the future, we hope. Patients come in one door, grow their cells down the hallway, and deliver them on a clinical trial back to them, and have the lab, the biobanking,
On
the
site.
clinical research, the trial data collection, the leukapheresis and FDA blood banking requirements, the high complexity lab, a pipeline of many more cells that we can keep trying and have many shots on goal, not run out of one trick ponies. We can really keep iterating a better and better cell each year. And then we have a learning infrastructure within called the BioDice, which is our biostatistics digitally integrated clinical enterprise. So we can learn how the clinical lab talks to the factory, which talks to the patient data. And no other model has all three of these talking at the highest granularity of data standards. And that's what we're building. So, and eventually this model can learn how to make it better and better and better. And that's really where it should be.
Is that AI powered?
It's not AI powered yet, because AI is wonderful, but you can't just throw AI a spaghetti mess and say, figure it out. You instead have to define data based on data standards.
It's like creating like almost like an Excel sheet for it, right? Like you got to plug in the
First
formula.
Every data element has to be defined. They have to be defined the relationship.
Okay.
Everything has to be fully defined according to FDA specs. Once we have all those data fields that are within those regulatory structures, then and within our own lab and some other proprietary things that we might know and learn from the efficiencies of this model, like the warm chain itself, then we'll start letting the AI learn more or study more and start to help us understand relationships.
Gotcha.
Of the data. So yes, AI, it will be part of that stack, but we can't start off with AI off the bat. You just got to build it, let it, make sure we're doing it, building the data stack correctly. So this is just going back in time to our beginning. So we had the foresight to open up our first lab study to actually grow these cells way back in 2007, and that's on clinicaltrials.gov. So we've now accrued about 2,000 patients on this in-house lab study. We call it Biostatistics 0001. So we can, as we meet patients, offer, hey, can we have an extra tube of blood? Or if you got good veins, can we leukapherese to learn about your immune system? If you get a biopsy, can we have a sliver of the fresh tumor for our cells? So we can mount these,
right?
Yeah, biobank, and then mount our own immune responses down the hallway so we can learn. So our mantra is pherese, grow, dose. We're not dosing anybody yet, but that's where we want to be in a year or two, all under one roof, all to the FDA regulations of GMP, GLP, GCP.
Gotcha.
So our first cancer patient there on the left, who was able to donate multiple leukapheresis, we learned a lot from him. And that was on the right there, that's that is the tabletop pharmaceutical manufacturing device that can grow these cells in a closed system. And that was the very first run we did. It's exciting for us to have that first one. And we've learned a lot since then on how to refine that. So the cell product we're working on as our first military fraction, if you will, is we call it the reinvigorated fraction. And we say it's antigen experience. We understand that it knows the cancer. It has memory of the cancer, but it's just so exhausted, it needs to be reinvigorated. And so we call it the biostatistics immune fraction 1, or BCY-IF1. And it's autologous, patient-specific, actually cancer-specific, adaptive, reinvigorated, and we hope it'll be affordable. So that makes sense about where we're going.
That just literally reminds me of the decentralization. Like the patient's not having to go to multiple different places, locations. Like it's all under, like you said, one roof.
If we show it works at one facility, we think we could replicate the facilities in the whole model, the facility model, like in other cities. Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
So on the left, I just want to show you some videos about, first, how does cancer grow under a video time-lapse, microscopy. And then we'll show you how does the immune system kill hand-to-hand combat. And this is really cool because, as I like to joke, this is how people get into the cult of immunotherapy. They start seeing it like, oh, wow, it's not just a black box. I saw it. I saw my immune cells kill. And we know the patients who donated some of these cells. And we're like, hey, here, your immune cells killing your tumor.
Man, I would love to see that for my own.
So on the left side, yeah, because we know your immune cells did kill your tumor. They grew them up. They had a batch, but I don't think they didn't.
Nah,
add your.
I got no visuals of.
You got the scans and you got the visual, but it'd be neat to offer that as an assay for
That'd be very cool.
Every patient should be able to see if and how their own immune system can kill their own tumor. That's my dream right there. So here on the left is a single tumor cell. Okay, right there in
Got-
the middle, a
Gotcha.
single tumor cell.
Okay.
And we got it from a little biopsy, and then we watched it grow over 5 days, and we can calculate that every 16 hours it divides 2, 4, 8, 16, 64, whatever. And you can see it divide, and it starts to crawl across the plate. So just kind of know cancer cells, they grow. They grow kind of fast. So it has doubled like over 16 hours. It's probably doubled about 8 or 9 times just in 5 days. 8 or 9 doublings as starting as one cell. Imagine if it was a BB, 8 or 9 doublings would be like to the size of a pea or maybe almost a marble, but that's significant. So here, those cells are squamous. They're kind of big and laid out flat. They actually have motility. They kind of climb across, and then they divide and split. So they're spreading away from each other and kind of exploring and growing across the plate. And so that's just a good example of just a tumor cell biopsy that started one cancer. On the right side, this is really cool. This is tumor cells right out of the bloodstream.
Wow.
Now, tumor cells in the bloodstream, most tumor cells in the bloodstream, call them circulating tumor cells. Most of them, probably 95% of them, are like leaves on a tree, where when the leaves fall down, the tumor cells are getting sloughed off on the periphery of the leaves in autumn and falling down from the tree. The tumor cells are kind of dying as they get sloughed off. And then you can find them floating in the bloodstream, but they don't grow.
Okay.
But if you're lucky in the bloodstream with enough leukapheresis, and you do this on enough cancer patients, if you're lucky, you won't just see individual tumor cells. You might get an acorn or a branch with acorns and get a little cluster of tumor cells right out of the bloodstream. And if you're lucky enough to get that, then you can actually grow the whole darn branch and twig, and it'll take over the plate. And so
Yeah.
this is an example of that. So on the right is a circulating tumor cell cluster that was grown for 17 days. Now it's growing slower than the Petri dish on the left. Its doubling time is 3 days. So it's growing slower. So it's like a longer time-lapse video. And clusters behave a little bit differently than just a single tumor, like on the left. A cluster on the right actually behaves like, we say, a little organoid. This is the term spheroids or organoids. You'll see this in the literature. Tumors like little baby organs. They get their own blood supply. This thing on the right is not going to get its own blood supply, but it creates a sphere. In the center of the sphere, it's hypoxic. It actually has its own, it moves fluid, and fluid shifts and pressure in and out. And on the outside of the sphere, the tumor cells start to die and slough off. Just like I told you, they slough off and back into the circulation.
Okay.
The inside of the reason the inside of the tumor cell is green is the tumor center starts to either go dormant or kind of recycles itself. It dies, it eats itself and recycles and kind of gives birth to another little layer. So the center of it is undergoing its own death. And the green it's a green enzyme for caspase. It's a green fluorescent protein enzyme. So basically, so the audience knows, when caspase, it's a marker of cell death or cell turnover. And when the green is there, it means that the caspase enzyme is digesting its own self. And so it's a marker of what part of the cell that's growing is dying and kind of regenerating itself. So we'll start this video. It's kind of cool. And you can see the center is dying, it kind of fluctuates. And out on the periphery, that rim of the tumor cells on the periphery, they start to slough a little bit, and they might expand and grow. As it gets into the fourth day, they expand a little bit bigger. And then I think into the fifth day, they start to expand even a little bit bigger. So they're starting to spread out. So this would be a circulating tumor cell cluster behaving like an organoid, living in a petri dish in an incubator. And it's kind of spreading its roots there. It's laying track. And it's kind of the organoids that are kind of moving a little bit across the center of the stage. But it's pretty much spread out now across the
Yeah. And it's getting smaller and smaller over time.
It's kind of flattens out like a pancake.
Yeah.
And center of it, as it flattens out, the center of it is not like raised up like a sphere. The center of it doesn't have as much death, but those are still actively growing tumor cells kind of spreading out. across the plate. And that is a good way that we can show that we can actually get tumor and grow tumor right out of the bloodstream. And if you've got tumor and you can
Oh,
get it just
wow.
with a leukapheresis, or if you're lucky, a tube of blood or a bag of blood, now we've got the antigen source. Now we have the target, right? And we can see the target
Yeah.
for the immune systems in the other petri dish. And then you can set up and mount an immune attack against one petri dish, pour it into the other, basically. And so the
Okay.
next slide is really cool, because the next slides show, hey, now let's mount an immune response, right, of autologous tumor, patient's own tumor, to see if they can kill a patient's own immune system, to see if they can kill their own tumor. Okay. So on the left is a 62-year-old female who had
Is that
cholangiocarcinoma,
cholangiocarcinoma? Okay.
bile duct cancer. And on the right is a synovial sarcoma, a younger patient who had a wedge lung resection removed. And we got the TIL, we got the tumor and the TIL. We grew them separately so then we could add them back and mount an immune response. So let's focus on the left. The left is a leukapheresis derived immune cells that we got. We got our tumor from a biopsy, but the immune cells we got from the leukopak, we grew them up, and we had a tumor growing for a couple weeks in another petri dish. And so we reinvigorated our T cells in our GMP type of process we have for 10. And we show here that on the left, the little round cells are the immune cells. And look at how
Okay.
small those immune cells are compared to a big tumor. The immune cells are like 1/10 the size of a big tumor. And the big tumors they look like leaves or squames, leaves sticking to the plate. And wherever you see the green is where either a tumor is dying or the immune system is attacking it. And so how this
Okay.
works is you start to see the immune cells are moving around. The tumors stick to the plate, right? The tumors adhere to the plate, but the immune cells are moving around on top and ganging up on tumor. And the immune cells, they start to cluster like a beehive. That's a
Okay.
characteristic of immune cells. When they get angry and inflamed, they start talking to each other and they shake each other's hand and then they attack the tumor. So there's a lot of hand-to-hand combat going on. Then the immune cells touch each other, they get more reinvigorated, they split, divide, and attack the tumor even more. So it's very interesting how this happens. And I could watch this stuff all day long.
Yeah, I was gonna say conquer and divide.
Very
Like
cool.
creating alliances over here.
So in the background are the immune cells, and they were kind of big flat leaves, and now the leaves are disappeared. Maybe there's a couple left, but the burst of green is the tumor dying. And now those immune cells have kind of clustered together like little hives of like 5 or 6 immune cells all clustered together,
Okay.
ganging up on whatever is left over of the roots of that tumor.
Trying to create like a last stand.
Bingo. Yeah. And this is how we can kind of determine what fraction of the immune cells are doing the best killing over what period of time. See, these are co-culture immune killing assays or tumor killing assays. And so that tumor or that immune cells killed 100% of tumor about 18 hours.
I was
Over
gonna
on
say,
the
what does that
right,
say, over 10 days? Is that right?
over 10 days. So
Okay.
in culture,
Okay.
and so we expanded the tumor over 10 days to kind of get them revved up and multiplied and reinvigorated. Then we took those we took those immune cells and added them into a petri dish with the patient's own tumor.
And then after that, that's the
And
18
it
hours.
was 18 hours.
Okay.
So it was a 4-day time lapse, but they really had killed 100% of them in the first 18 hours, that first little burst.
Gotcha.
So over here on the right is a young patient with a lung metastasis from synovial sarcoma. We grew her tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. You call them TIL, we call them tick. We would call them tick because there's more than just lymphocytes in there,
Yeah.
NK cells and macrophages. And so we call
Right.
them tick just to give all the immune cells equal credit. So we grew up these tick for 2 weeks and then unleashed them on the autologous tumor. It kills a little bit slower. Why? Is because synovial sarcoma is not that mutated, right? It doesn't have that many targets for the immune system to attack because it's not carcinogen driven.
Okay.
Synovial sarcoma patient does nothing wrong to have a carcinogen exposure unless they got radiation to their knee or something like that. But on the left, the cholangiocarcinoma, that usually is carcinogen or tobacco smoke driven. So lots of targets, faster immune cell kill. On the right, it's a slower immune cell kill because sarcomas they're more spindly. They're not shaped like a big flat leaf on a plate, they stick like a pine needle, more of a spindle. They stick like a pine needle on the plate. So when you look at her tumor, it looks more like pine needles on the petri dish, and all the little round dots are her immune cells that we just poured on top. So we can see how this video killing goes.
Wow. And then how long that says it's over 2 weeks?
This is the cells were killed over 2 weeks. The time lapse is over 80 hours. So 80 hours is what, like 4 days, 3.5 days. So you can see as the immune cells swarm and gang up, the little more red burst of the caspase. And then those little spindly tumor cells that were there in the background, they're all getting gobbled up.
Oh.
They're gone. So after 3 days, 3 days and 10 hours, which is 80 hours, tumor gone. So this is autologous immune cell killing autologous tumor. Just 2 examples of the cool movies. I like the movies because, again, this gets people into the cult.
Yeah.
So next, I'll just just for teaching, show that these movies, when the caspase bursts, the video microscope has detectors of like the green burst color, like how strong is the green burst. And you can plot the green burst on the y-axis and then plot time on the x-axis. And then you can look at the kinetics, and the green line at the top, that's like the patient we saw with the cholangiocarcinoma, right? Her tumor, her immune cell killing over 18 hours, 100%. And then if we take that same cholangiocarcinomas patient and we try to see if her immune cells will kill another tumor, it doesn't really kill another person's tumor, like an allogeneic kill. So what we're seeing happen is, as we do these experiments, autologous immune cells kill autologous tumor the best. And if you try to switch them off, like somebody else's immune cells, that might kill it a little bit or barely none at all. And there's other factors in there, but it's just really, really interesting. You need your own immune system's cells to do the best one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat, the best killing success. So this just shows you that it's just a good teaching thing. And this is stuff we had sent to the FDA about how well we have learned to iterate and make the fold expansion of our immune cells better and better over time. So this is going back a couple of years, looking at our best runs of our immune cells. And each time we made betterment, we made improvements of different, maybe gas pedals, different cytokines, different media, different things, different culture flasks. So we really have learned through many, many iterations, trial and error, just to show how much we are trying to contribute to the R&D of this. Yeah. That we were able to improve what used to be, we used to think, hey, a 50, remember I told you, there was like a 9-fold, 5 to 9-fold of tumor cell growing. We were able to get the immune cells to go 50 to 100-fold. And we thought that was good 3 or 4 years ago. Now, fast forward, we're now routinely getting 700-fold. So we're able to really, really take those immune cells and learn how to grow them really big into bigger, basically what we think will be hopefully future doses. So that's just for good teaching. So and then once we grow those cells, so the audience understands, we actually look and compare the cells that we have grown, fully reinvigorated, and we compare to them before they were reinvigorated, like how much better killing, what markers changed on their surface, like are there markers that they got reinvigorated? Yes. Did they lose markers of maybe other markers that might have indicated exhaustion? Yes. Did the immune cells, were they metabolically active? Like, did they kill faster? Yes. Were they able to degranulate? There's different ways immune cells kill, by degranulation or by direct killing with a hand-to-hand combat handshake called fast ligand. So we look at those different things. We even look at the ratio of the immune cells to the tumor, the T to E. The E is the effector cell, the immune effector cells ratio, and can look at allogeneic, other people's, immune cell product and see if it kills another tumor. And we look at those ratios to see what's the differences, and even look at how tightly, the bottom there is called avidity, how tightly do the immune cells bind to the tumor, which is like they have to bind for a few minutes before they kill it, right? It's like they're engaging on it. Like, how sticky are they? Like a starfish sticky or an octopus sticky? And we can actually look at that, and we can do what's called ultrasound force avidity, put in some ultrasound waves, sound waves, to see how much force in our force, like little micronewton meters, does it take to make that immune cell fall off the tumor, it's about ready to kill. And these are the things we learn, and it's very cool stuff. I just want your audience, the immune cell is real. These things can happen when you take control of the immune system, and you can do these experiments. Um, Also for teaching, inject the cells into mice in the tail vein, or we can inject it right into the tumor's hind leg and look and see, do the immune cells by themselves cause any weight changes in the mice? No. We have seen some of the human immune cells may get into certain organs. Human cells are bigger than mice. So if we put human cells into a mice, it may, as it's passing through the lung or the kidney, some of those immune cells may get clung there. So we did see that. So we'll be monitoring for that as we do our trials. And then we even inject human immune cells that we have mounted an immune response into a chick embryo. We put the patient's tumor in the chick embryo and then add the immune cells into the chick embryo. And that model lets us be able to do a lot more experiments quicker and faster over like 1 to 2 days. Whereas with the mice, you got to wait 2 or 3 weeks and you can only do like 7 mice at a time. The chick embryo, you can set up hundreds of chick embryos in a big array and do a lot more iterations. And we're learning what types of reagents and combinations of different things do better to help our immune cells or the patient's immune cells kill better. So this is kind of cool stuff. Any questions about that? So it shows the science behind this is very interesting. And then this is like our last slide. We did an abstract maybe 2 years ago, ended up a publication a few years ago about manufacturing immune cells at the point of care, even though we haven't dosed anybody with our biocytic cells yet, just showing the number of steps. The top picture there is the number of steps it takes to do immune cell manufacturing when you have to ship, freeze, thaw to different facilities. In fact, I just had a call earlier today with a presentation from an industry panel that said the number of handoffs is there's 30 handoffs when cells have to go through centralized manufacturing.
That's a time constraint.
Bingo.
For everybody.
Everybody, time, cost,
and
sticks, all those things. So in what we think is the ideal process, which is point of care manufacturing, we can get those handoffs down to, we think, just 4, 5, 6 handoffs, but they're all like down the hallway in a warm chain, like immediately. So we really think that what we're doing might eventually make a difference, both on affordability, efficacious, hopefully effectiveness once we get it into patients. So I put those abstracts there. This is just our team from last year. It's like our clinical and research team, just to shout out. Yeah, so I'll stop in there and bring back. So thanks for letting me present all that.
I love how you described it. Step on the gas, release the brakes.
When people get sick, like from an infection, they know that symptoms can ramp up pretty quick, both from the infection, but also the immune response. And with the tumors, with the immune system in cancer, remember I mentioned at the last talk, cancer is 99.999% self. So the human immune system doesn't ramp up that quick unless it is a little more foreign. Yeah, or unless there's a need for it. So, or unless you give it a big gas pedal or release the brakes. But I think the missing part in some of that is the steering wheel. Just giving the brakes, release the brakes, yeah, isn't a steering wheel. So we hope that the autologous immune cell fractions will be a steering wheel guide, ex vivo back to in vivo, and steer it towards the tumor microenvironment to mount an immune response there locally. But again, all this is still yet to be fully determined. We know TIL works, like you got first generation TIL. As we work on this peripheral TIL, for lack of a better analogy, there may be different gas pedals that we need to use. There may be different release the brakes. There may be different adjuvants and different experiments. And we might find it's initially toxic, or we have to titrate the levels. So all this has to be vetted on the trial, on FDA, future INDs. There's a long way to go, but the immune system is real. I think that's the message: is the immune system is real. You're living proof. The checkpoint drugs work. Durable responders going out 10, 12, 13 years. But that bridge the gap of how can we really take full control of the immune cells so that we can bridge those other 60 to 70% of patients to overwhelm the tumor. And that's where I think the industry is going. And if we can make a small dent in the point of care approach, and if your audience is aware of that and they're aware on clinical trials, we're now seeing, I'd probably say at least half of the large academic centers are starting to do some point of care attempts at CAR T manufactured in their academic phase one facilities. So we're already starting to see that a little bit at the big academic centers. And certainly in other countries are seeing that. I do think the good news is if as the FDA becomes a little more progressive and hopefully loosening up some point of care, and like I said, without saying anything, the FDA gave
Yeah.
us good feedback, but it's making us feel hopeful that point of care manufacturing may be reasonably done in America, hopefully at least with our model at one site in the future, as long as all the other FDA requirements for GMP and their full authority and approval of every single, step is
Process.
fully vetted.
On top of that, it's the reduction of time from start to finish. And it sounds so simple to me, but for somebody that is unfamiliar with any
Yeah.
of it, you only know what you need to know until you need to know it. But if you have to travel to XYZ location where the same thing that you could have done there, where they have to ship it elsewhere, you can do under one roof, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
That's you could essentially take a 3-week process, make it a 1-week process.
Yeah.
And within that time frame, a lot can happen for a patient physically, financially. Time is the most valuable asset,
That's right. Absolutely.
period.
Cancer patient, their tumors are double. You saw the doubling time. I mean, they're
Yeah.
doubling 5 days, 2 weeks, doubling time. That's golf ball, tennis ball. I mean, those things are doubling. So time is of the essence. So if a model like this brings it to the proximity of the patient, yeah, I think that's a win-win. And if more physicians can learn how to do point of care manufacturing as part of future facilities like this, that's a win for everybody. And you as a TIL survivor, you carry the flag of what the immune system can do. It's all about awareness, like I said, clinicaltrials.gov, where patients can seek out cell therapy trials. It's all over clinicaltrials.gov. They
Yeah.
just have to navigate that.
That's one of the things I try to, help out when people reach out is, on the search criteria, to enter specific things, that can correlate back to, that search. So you have a solid tumor, are they not actively recruiting? Is it a cell therapy, location? As we're talking right now is my 6-year anniversary since I
Wow.
was in the hospital doing my TIL, and this year will be my 8th year since diagnosis. And when you look at all the survivor data, you're considered a survivor from the day you're diagnosed. And so any bit of hope, that can be brought to, patients as time goes on and it's moving forward to know that, there are durable responses. There are what a lot of people do consider to call cures, not just, treatments. And if they know that they're accessible, then there is examples of this works. It's a process, not a prescription.
Yeah.
Like you can't just say, okay, like put all these chemicals together and then go administer it to this patient and it's going to work.
Yeah.
It's the uncontrollable division of cells is what
Yeah.
cancer is. And so whatever caused your DNA to mutate and become cancerous, it's the same thing that's going to be able to cure you. But you just got to be able to pinpoint that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, super cool, John.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for hosting me and letting me have a chance to, give hope to your audience about where, cell therapy has come from and where it's going and, promote, clinical trials in general. I think less than 2 or 3% of cancer patients participate in a trial. Most patients have only had 1980s, 1990s drugs for most, solid tumors. There's definitely a pipeline of hope out there. And the more they can be aware of how to navigate into trials and seek out those options, absolutely. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I can't thank you enough for always coming on here. For everybody that's listening, go to tiltalks.com for more information. John, moving forward, is there anything that you want to mention and or dig into next time we connect?
So maybe let me think about it. I think that these slides are well received. I think you're right. It's helping just keep helping connect the dots within the ecosystem and the model, and so to raise awareness. Let me think about. I do have some good slides about how to start a phase one program, which I gave at public presentations, and it is very patient facing, so it might be good. We had some patient advocates there. I think I can show those slides again and try to make it layman's like cancer survivor, like why start a trial program? What is that? How's it different? So I think I could send the two talks, like, two 30-minute talks or something.
All right, that concludes today's episode of TIL Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. I'd like to thank my guest today for joining me on TIL Talks. To our listeners who have not yet done so already, please follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. For more information about TIL Talks and related resources, please visit www.tiltalks.com. I'm Chris White. As always, sending love to everybody. Peace.